many of our organizations feel the need for folks to step up and say it's a good thing to preserve the economy and to help it going forward and to raise the issue of having a balanced approach to the budget. So at this time, I think we're all ready at some point here to go and be out on the lawn to have our first kickoff event. And so the information about the organization is in your packets today. We'll be working with legislators and offering our services to help them as they try to work through this difficult time with the budget, and we'll talk with them about the need for a balanced approach. We believe this is an important moment in our history. It's time for leaders to come together, for all of us to work together. We're offering that as our service to our leaders, that we would help. But the response that we have to this message will be critical to ensuring a long-term growth and success of the people of Ohio. We believe that our future rests in the balance. So with that, I'm just going to we'll end our remarks and open it up for questions from the media. And so if folks would want to join me back up here so that we can address your questions if there are any.
What is your strategy going to be for approaching lawmakers and the administration to get your message out?
Well, I'll start, and if you guys want to chime in. We have a legislative subcommittee of our group, and that's chaired by Darrell Johnson. And we're trying to proactively reach out and meet with legislators so that we can talk to them about our concerns. And we will just be proactive through the whole legislative process. I think that one of the things that we think is important is that because we do have a democratic process for the budget to be enacted, we can all participate in that, and we will be proactively in different ways educating them and the general public about our issues.
Will you be proposing any specific tax proposals?
Is that what you want to take now?
As of right now, we have the three-part approach that I mentioned. And we specifically believe that it's important to get this out on the table and that there be a discussion about revenue as an important element of the budget issue. And we're not prescribing some very specific thing. We can make some more specific proposals perhaps as time goes on, but I think we have a broader kind of approach than prescribing something very specific beyond what we've already said.
We've heard you use the word revenue 3 or 4 times. Can you utter the phrase tax increase?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Well, we've heard you use the euphemism here, revenues. And I'm wondering can you utter the phrase tax increase and say, look, we are pushing for a tax increase?
Well, I think revenues are certainly taxes, so we're not trying to sugarcoat what we're saying here. The point is that there needs to be a balanced approach that doesn't rely entirely on cuts. And so certainly, yes, revenues are taxes. I think that's certainly what we're saying.
I'd like, if I might, just to make a comment in response to really all of these questions. I think about our strategy and about how we see it unfolding over time. Obviously, today is a beginning to bring this to the general public. We will be meeting with legislators and have a legislative strategy. I'm sure we'll be having conversations with the administration. It's really a multi-dimensional need that we're addressing, and all of these people have to play a part for it to succeed. But we are convinced that over the next several months, what may seem today like kind of a bold, to utter the tax word, for example, might seem kind of bold. We think in several months, particularly after the budget hits the table and people begin to understand very well what the problems are in a much more bold relief way, that people will be coming to this conclusion with us, and we'll be then devising the kind of specificity, Kathy, that I think you're looking for.
And the other thing I would say is that it's probably not going to be one single answer, and that's why I think to have lawmakers start to talk about what those answers might be. We don't want to prescribe something and then have them maybe rather do it a different way. So there are Zach mentions a few specifics in his early remarks, looking at tax expenditures and so on. But the other thing I would say is that there are other groups out there that have already mentioned some ideas that could be implemented. We heard from the Center for Community Solutions. We've heard from even when you take a look at the report that just came out from the Chamber of Commerce. There's some discussion in there about looking at tax expenditure. So we're not the only group that is mentioning these things and suggesting different ideas. And so I think that has to unfold as the debate goes on.
Carl, just to follow up on your comments, I was going to ask, there was a lot said during the campaign by the governor and lawmakers about no tax pledges, and a lot of them took them and such. But from what you're telling me is you think that there may be a softening of that position in the weeks and months to come?
Well, the short answer is yes. I think we have undertaken this effort out of our common understanding of the problems. Many of us work very closely with some of the problem areas and know all too well what some of the implications are. But out of also a common belief that in time, many people out there, we think the majority of the people are going to understand that trying to do this budget with cuts alone is simply not in the interests of Ohio. Ohioans who are vulnerable now, Ohioans who have never thought they were vulnerable until it happens. I can tell you, just a very quick little vignette, in Hamilton County, the human services or job and family services people there say that a third of the people coming to them now are people who've never been in those systems before and never thought they would be in those systems until unemployment hit or some crisis that parachuted them in. And at that point, they're very grateful that those services are there. So we think that people out there who are observing this process and understanding what's going on in the economy are going to join us in coming to this solution.
When you say you think people will be joining your stance, do you mean lawmakers, the administration, do you mean Ohioans in general?
Well, I think both. I think that we expect and very much hope we continue to talk with other organizations and other people, and this is not an end point, this is the beginning. And we fully expect that there will be others coming to join us, and also legislators and others who will listen seriously to what we have to say and embrace certainly parts of it.
And there's a symbiotic relationship there, of course. I mean, as the public comes to that view, they communicate that to the legislators, and it tends to take on more credence and credibility.
I mean, I would also say that perhaps in your question, Bill, it makes it seem as if this is somehow some little tiny minority that we're talking about. To advocate that there should be revenue as a part of the budget solution is something that I think most polls have shown people believe. So we're not coming to you as some tiny little fragment of public opinion here. Well, certainly we represent the groups that have endorsed this, and we make no claim for people beyond that. I think that many people in Ohio recognize the need for revenue to be a part of the solution. And so I think that it's not, we don't start from a place that's perhaps where something.
Well, there was a poll before the election that Dispatch had, I think, and they asked Ohioans, what do you think is the best, just cuts or just tax hikes? And a majority did say a mix of tax hikes.
Well, that's exactly what I was referring to.
Okay, but that was before the election, and even though that came out before the election, you had virtually all Republicans vowing no tax hike at all, and you had most Democrats saying, well, we don't want to raise taxes either. So my question is, since the public opinion was already known then, before the election, and you couldn't even get Democrats to come out for this, how can you possibly envision that you could get a mix of Democrats and Republicans later?
Well, I guess I'd say a couple of things. One, I don't think that there were many candidates in the election who specifically were endorsing tax increases. So voters were not asked, do you support this approach or do you support a cuts-only approach? They weren't voting on that. So I don't think that that's an accurate way to look at how the voters have looked at things. Well, I would say a couple of things to that. I think two things. One is that you have to look, when we talk about taxes and revenues, most of the time it's as if the other side of the equation doesn't exist, that the spending is just sort of nowhere. The fact is that when you cut revenue, when you cut the budget, it has a negative effect not only on all the services that Col has mentioned, but on the economy. When you lay people off, you know, that's the effect. So I think that, you know, you have to take that into account.
And I think you have to be very judicious about how you decide to do it. And but I'm going to echo Zach's thoughts about the fact that cuts in spending at the state level will result in loss of jobs. So in some sense, it's going to exacerbate the problem if we take that route completely.